Hello. Would you please remain standing for the national anthem? I love to sing this song because I am extremely patriotic, and I think it's especially a wonderful honor to do when you love your country. No taking a knee, no being disrespectful, and with that, I always sing to the flag. So I'm going to turn around and face the flag. I'm not being rude. I just sing to the flag of the United States. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. Thank you. Thank you. You may be seated. Well, it feels really good to be home, I have to say. I have been... Before I begin, I want to introduce you to somebody very special. Actually, she's the reason I'm here, like, as in, like, here. My mom, Mitzi Sestero, please stand, Mom. She's been feeling a little under the weather, so I wasn't sure she was going to make it. So I'm really, really thankful that she was able to make it, because I know she would have really missed out if she hadn't been here. I guess Nora told you a little bit about me and my plight to Harlingen. My mother is actually a native from Harlingen, but she went to Venezuela to teach many years ago, and met my father, who was Venezuelan, and got married, had children, and unfortunately that didn't work. Her marriage did not work, so we ended up back in Harlingen with my grandparents. So when I was 10 years old, I went to Dishman Elementary. Do we have any Dishman? Woo! So I went to Dishman 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. Then I went to Gay Junior High. I was a proud gay cheerleader, except I hear that is no longer even here. So, you know, so much for tradition. So then I went on to Vernon, and then, of course, Harlingen High School, graduated in 1984. So I have roots here. But one of the things that I have always been is conservative. I got to see Ronald Reagan when he came and announced to my family that I was a Republican. That didn't go over too well, but you know, I stuck to my principles because I knew that the Republican Party really was my party because of my values. I could not vote for a party that did not share my values. And so I've always been very, very conservative, and I've always been a Republican, and proud of it. So, one of the things that I wanted to just share a little tiny bit about, because I know you're here to hear my husband, is, you know, being from Venezuela, still having family there, I am always amazed how people can vote for a candidate that is okay with socialism or actually pushes socialism. And I often ask them, do you even know what socialism is? Do you understand that socialism is a form of theft? Do you understand that it's taking from hardworking people and giving to people that perhaps, whether they want to work or not, or have other issues, it doesn't equalize things. It actually equalizes misery. Because if you've heard the news in Venezuela, Venezuela went from a very prosperous country, very rich oil country, and now they are eating their pets because they have no food, no medicine. That's what socialized medicine gets you, is no doctors, no medicine, misery. You can die of a common cold. It's horrific. And so the thought of them thinking that something like that is good for America, I'm like, are you kidding me? Do you actually understand what this can do to a country? So I can, and so I speak about it. And my husband brilliantly makes movies about it. And that's another story altogether of how our lives actually crossed, and how we are now a very solid power couple for this cause, and very proud of it. I know that many of you know Dinesh has written many books. Many of them have been bestsellers, New York Times bestsellers, and also #1 bestsellers. He has done 4 movies: 2016 Obama's America, America, Imagine a World Without Her, Hillary's America, and then most recently, Death of a Nation, that is now on DVD. So, and we are concocting a 2020 movie as well. So that'll be out. So I know you know about that, and his bio is on his website. But some of the things that you don't know is what I'm going to tell you. So Dinesh loves chocolate. So much so that sometimes he tries to sneak a few. And of course, being very witty, I actually catch him. So we went on this major diet in January, because if you saw the movie, Death of a Nation, Dinesh and I maybe appear to be a little heavier. We can blame it on, you know, how they say that you gain 10 pounds in a movie, but that wasn't actually it. We were eating so much that we decided to go on a little diet. And I think for him, the worst part of the whole thing was not being able to eat chocolates. So now that we're on maintenance, all bets are off. He has really started doing that again. So anyway, and you know, he of course is just a sweetheart. I'm always amazed how, you know, we're at an airport or someplace and people recognize him, and he's always very gracious and a very nice person. A lot of times people that are successful, things like that go to their heads and they think they're, you know, above or beyond reach. But Dinesh has never been that way. And in our personal lives, he's completely not that way. Super sweet to my mom, as she knows right here. He adores her. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce you to my sweet husband, Dinesh D'Souza.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm really delighted and thrilled to be here. Ever since I met Debbie, I was introduced to this window. I got a window into this part of America, which I had no experience of before. And it's very close to Debbie's heart, and it's actually given me a window into her, who she is, and how she became the person she is today. I was 17 years old when I first saw America. It happened in kind of a funny way. I was a young high school kid in Mumbai, used to be called Bombay, India. And a fellow from the Rotary Club came and gave a speech at my school and said we have an exchange program in which students can go to other countries, Australia, Canada, America, and study for a year. And this whole concept intrigued me, and so I went home and I talked to my grandfather and I said, I wonder if I should apply for this Rotary program to go to America. And his reaction was, don't go. And I said, well, why not? And he goes, because it's too white. He said, it's just very white over there. And my grandfather, interestingly, was reacting not to America so much, but to long-standing British colonialism in India. And he was projecting his views of that onto America. I remember the plane descending in New York where I was making my flight connection. I looked out of the window. I saw the Statue of Liberty. I saw the New York skyline. And I remember right then I had this kind of very funny feeling come over me that my life was going to be completely different from that moment on. I felt I was moving from the corner of the world to the center of it. And I recognized that I was coming to a country that was not only different from the one I grew up in, but one that was in many ways unique in the world. This was recognized even by fellows I knew in Bombay who had never set foot in America. In fact, I remember one guy who would say to me in school, he's like, when I grow up, I'm going to go to America. And he kept saying this almost like a sort of a chant. And finally I said to him, I was really puzzled, but I said, why are you so eager to want to move to America? He goes, Dinesh, I really want to go to a country where the poor people are fat. So America has the reputation worldwide of being the country of prosperity. And when I got to America, I noticed that to a large degree it is. Because when I first set foot in Arizona, where I lived for the year, I stayed with 4 different families and I attended public school. I would see what appeared to me these beautiful, impeccable homes. And they had 2 cars in the driveway, and some of them had a little pool, even if it was a little artificial pool, but there it was in the backyard. And I would ask people, I'd say, well, what does that guy do? And I kind of expected, oh, he's the vice president of this corporation. Turns out, they'd say, well, he doesn't do much. And I'm like, what? And then it hit me that really a country is not actually judged by the kind of life it provides for the rich and successful and the super smart. A country is sort of judged by the kind of life it provides to the ordinary guy. And what struck me is that in America, the ordinary guy is actually pretty ordinary. He doesn't study particularly hard. He doesn't work particularly hard. And yet I say, wow, this guy has 2 cars in his driveway, and this guy has a little pool in his backyard, and this guy's out there barbecuing on Saturday. So it hit me that American prosperity is real in the sense that it gives a remarkably good life, even to the person who is quite ordinary, quite undistinguished. But at that time, I was not aware that there was something else that America would offer me in particular that was different from those things. Because I grew up in a middle-class family. My dad was an engineer, my mom was a housewife. And so I didn't grow up with any great luxury. But on the other hand, I didn't grow up lacking for anything. I was never hungry, I never missed a meal. Our family had a car. Now, I sometimes joke that our car had such big holes in the floor that if you looked down, you could actually see the ground. So, but I felt like I grew up in a comfortable life. And so, am I materially better off in America now? Yes. But it's actually not a radical difference. My life has changed more in other ways. What to me has been really striking about America, the American dream, as people call it, is the chance to write the script of my own life. In other words, I've been able to do things in America and become things that would have been completely impossible if I had stayed back in India, even now. The point I'm trying to suggest is that America doesn't just make possible the prosperous life, but it makes possible a life in which we are in the driver's seat of our own destiny. This is a country where your destiny isn't given to you, it's constructed by you. And it's a country in which your major decisions in life, where to live, whom to love, whom to marry, what to believe, these are decisions that we as individuals can make for ourselves. So to me, the core idea of America is the self-directed life. And I think this is why America is such a powerful magnet for the world, why people in so many places want to come here, and because they know that it's a better life here. Now, the strange thing is when I set foot, I actually, after my exchange student year, I was admitted to college. I went to Dartmouth College in New Hampshire, and one of the first things I heard in college was this notion that all cultures are basically equal. This is one of the sort of foundational ideas of what is sometimes called multiculturalism. All cultures are equal. And I said, all cultures are equal? That actually doesn't make any sense. And it certainly makes no sense to anyone who's an immigrant. Why? Because an immigrant is naturally biased in favor of your own culture. You're raised in a certain society, this is your family, these are your neighbors, this is your life. You don't know any other, and naturally you're going to love the community that is yours. So anyone who's going to pack up their tent and move to another culture is actually doing a certain kind of voting. By that I mean they're voting with their feet in the most dramatic way possible. And in my case, how can you interpret what I'm doing except, in a sense, voting in the best way I know how, against the world in which I was born and raised, and voting to move to another society. And why would I do that if I didn't think that this other society was in some fundamental way better than where I was born? Better for me, and better for my life, and better for my family. In the 1980s, I became very intrigued with American politics. And a lot of it, as with Debbie, had to do with Reagan. Reagan advanced something that I was not all that familiar with, which is a vision of American conservatism. And my previous idea of a conservative was some kind of a business guy with a toothbrush, mustache, and umbrella, someone really stodgy. And I had no understanding that conservatism was actually about ideas, that conservatives try to conserve things. But conserve what? Because if we look at any country or even any history, there's good and there's bad. What are you trying to conserve? Well, in America, conservatives are conserving the ideals of the American Revolution. They're trying to conserve the American dream. And right away, I began to scratch my head and say to myself, this is interesting, all this talk about the American dream. As far as I know, no other country has a dream. I mean, there's no Chinese dream. I really don't know of an Indian dream. There may be a French dream, but I don't think we want to know what it is. But there unquestionably is an American dream. And for Reagan, this dream actually meant three things that I think have come for me to define what American conservatism is. The first part of Reaganite conservatism was simply the idea that the world is a very dangerous place, and that in a dangerous world, we need to have strength, force, in order not to let the bad guys take over. Seems like a very simple idea, but its application is not that simple. Because in application, you know, when you take the philosophy seminar, you always realize, always choose the good guy over the bad guy. But that is actually the easy choice. In the real world, you often discover that the choice is not between the good guy and the bad guy, but between the bad guy and the really bad guy. And sometimes in life, you realize, I have to ally with the bad guy to get rid of the worst guy. Notice that in World War II, the United States allied with the bad guy, Stalin, because another bad guy, Hitler, posed a greater threat at the time. This can be called the principle of the lesser evil. The principle of the lesser evil is always choose the lesser evil to prevent the greater evil. And if you don't know that or you don't do that, you get very bad results. When Jimmy Carter, when I came to America, Jimmy Carter was president. And what happened in Iran was that the Shah of Iran was the ruler, and frankly, he was kind of a dictator. If you protested against him, he would bring in the secret police, they'd round you up, they'd carry you off in a wagon. And so Jimmy Carter said, there's the bad guy. Let's pull the Persian rug out from under him. Boom. And then what did we get? Khomeini. So in other words, in trying to get rid of the bad guy, Jimmy Carter got the worst guy. And all of what we now worry about in terms of Islamic radicalism, modern terrorism, suicide bombing, notice that before Khomeini, you would not be able to name a single world leader who ever urged his citizens to commit martyrdom, to blow themselves up because they hated the United States. No Arab leader ever said that before Khomeini. Khomeini started all this. And so, and in a sense, you could say we were at least partly responsible in putting him in power. I mean, I think this is why if today we had to give a presidential award for the greatest presidential nincompoop that we have ever had in the White House, at least in our lifetimes, I think Jimmy Carter must take the award. First prize. By the way, not Obama, who's a very different character. And I've had some more direct dealings with him in a kind of it's very eye-opening for me because it actually has shifted my perspective on America. Before my dealings with Obama, I thought of America in idealistic terms. And I even thought of American politics in idealistic terms. In other words, I thought American politics is a debate. and you've got one side that believes X, and you've got another side that believes Y. Very naive view of American politics, because politics, like life, isn't a debate. In reality, all the human emotions of anger, hatred, lust, revenge, all the things that we see in everyday life are embedded in politics as well. But amazingly, because I think I saw America through rose-colored eyes, I didn't really know that. And so I made a movie on Obama, 2016, Obama's America. Now, what's interesting about that movie was I had gotten the idea for the movie by reading Obama's book, Dreams from My Father. I was struck by the title. Not the dreams of my father, but the dreams from my father. Obama was sort of letting on, I got my dreams, my American dream, from my dad, who was not an American, but a Kenyan anti-colonialist. So part of what I did in the movie was I went to Kenya, and I stood in Obama's family grave, and I met Obama's family, and it was a very surreal experience. I met Obama's grandmother, and I said, oh, you're Obama's grandmother. She goes, I am not. It's like, what do you mean? She goes, Obama has 5 grandmothers. I go, 5 grandmothers? She goes, 5 grandmothers on his father's side, because his grandfather had 5 wives. I am not his actual grandmother, I am his step-grandmother. So suddenly I realized I'm in this totally different world, a world of polygamy. I mean, remember, people say, well, it's because Obama's grandfather was a Muslim. No, Muslims are only allowed to have 4 wives. So there was a further turn of the screw, if I may put it that way, going on there. Now, the reason I'm telling you all this is because I make a movie critical about Obama. Part of it was to expose hypocrisy. Because Obama was going around saying, we are our brother's keeper. And I was like, I discovered that Obama has a brother. And he's living in a hut in the slum of Nairobi. So what has Obama done to keep his own brother? And so there we are in the movie. I'm interviewing his brother. I said, what's Obama done for you? Absolutely nothing. So this was very annoying to Obama. And literally weeks after I make the movie, banging on my door. It's the FBI. And 2 perfectly pleasant young guys, I mean, literally they seemed to me in their 20s. But I knew something was cooking. And what was cooking was to accuse me of a campaign finance violation for giving money to a college friend of mine who was running for public office for the Senate in New York. I inadvertently gave too much. I gave $20,000 more than I could give. Now, this is done all the time. People do it all the time. To my knowledge, absent corruption, and by corruption I mean if you're not getting something out of it yourself, no American has ever been prosecuted, let alone locked up, for doing this. But in my case, I find myself in a courtroom. I hear this phrase, United States of America versus Dinesh D'Souza. And any immigrant is going to feel a little chill down your spine if you hear that. And this feeling is exacerbated when you actually start dealing with the government. You have the full power of the Justice Department, you have the full power of the FBI, and the conversation goes something like this. Did you exceed the campaign finance law? Yes, I did, and I should receive the same penalty as anybody else who did the same thing. To which they reply, not so fast. We're going to get you for bank fraud. You say, bank fraud? They go, yeah, because you took your money out of your bank account. And then you go, oh. And then they say, we're going to get you for mail fraud. You say, mail fraud? They go, yeah, because you put your check in the mail. And then it begins to occur to you that they are taking what you did, redescribing everything and making it a criminal violation. See, they've got a massive accordion of federal statutes that can be manipulated any which way to bring these charges. A lot of these laws were put into place to fight the mafia or to fight ISIS. You couldn't get Al Capone, so you get him on a tax violation. You get him on a technicality. You get him on parking. But you get him. So these laws are now applied to ordinary Americans. So I say all this because I think I've actually seen the up and the downside of America now. Seen it very clearly and come to recognize that even politics is motivated by very complex types of motives. Now, the good news for me, when I was locked up in this confinement center with 160, hardened felons, I realized all these people's lives have been destroyed. But in my case, I have to say, a happy ending. I was working in my office this May, a few months ago. The phone rang. I pick it up. It's the White House operator. Is this Mr. D'Souza? Hold the line for the President of the United States. And so I did. And on comes Trump. And he's in a very Trumpian mood. He goes, "Hey Dinesh, how's it going? I'm sitting here with John Kelly. You know John Kelly, don't you?" And I'm like, "I don't know John Kelly. I know who he is, but I don't know the guy." And then Trump begins to talk. His first line is, "I gotta tell you, man to man, you got screwed." And as he's speaking, it sort of slowly dawned on me. And I didn't just experience the elation of, wow, suddenly this whole felony label that has been strung around my neck is lifted. And suddenly I have all my rights back. I can vote. I still don't have the chutzpah to post on social media with a firearm. But I do have my Second Amendment right back. And I realize I have my whole American dream back. But on top of that, the political significance of what Trump was saying hit me, and that is that his action at that moment was just a giant up yours to the whole Obama administration. Now, there's a lot of talk in American politics now about how our society is divided. And I think that our problem in America today is not division per se, but gangsterization, lawlessness, the fact that the rules are going out the window. This actually is unprecedented in my lifetime in this country. Now, it's quite normal in other countries, but in America, I haven't seen this. I don't think that Reagan would know what to make of it. Reagan's was an era of gentleman's politics. You had political opposition, but it was all conducted as a kind of argument among friends. It was almost like in the old America, we all agreed about the goals, but we might disagree about the means. So we all agree, should America be strong? Of course. Should America be an influence to the world? Of course. Should America be prosperous? Of course. Now, we can argue about how to divide the pie, but the idea that you want to create as big a pie as possible, that you want to have as much economic growth as possible, the idea that we want not just the free but the decent society, there was no argument about this. The argument, as I say, was merely about the means. It seems to me what's changed in American politics now is a breakdown of understanding even about goals, and a willingness to demonize your opponents. I mean, I saw this in my own case. It was really obvious that the U.S. government, and by the U.S. government here, I mean the Department of Justice headed by Holder and by this prosecutorial team, their whole idea was, if we can lock Dinesh up for 20 years, we would be delighted to do it. Why? Because the way we see it, he's not a critic, he's an opponent. He's a bad guy, he's an enemy. We have to take him out however we can. And this, to me, was unnerving because this was not the way I saw American politics, and this is not the way American politics actually was. I mean, Jimmy Carter would no more dream of locking me up than Reagan would want to go lock up Michael Moore. Nobody thought like that. This is a new turn, dark turn in American politics. Now, a lot of people blame it on Trump. They go, Trump is the cause of the division. No, Trump didn't cause this division, it caused him. I mean, if you think about it, Republicans, going back for now 20 years, ever since Reagan, have been nominating these, you can only call them Boy Scouts. George H.W. Bush, Bob Dole, Mitt Romney, John McCain. All of these very good guys, and some of them such good guys that you wouldn't know what negative to say about them. I mean, if I had to write a recommendation for Mitt Romney to go to university, it would begin with something like this: not since Jesus Christ. We are talking about a super straight-laced guy. And yet, the moment he steps into the political arena, the left begins to bombard him and demonize him. He's, you're a greedy, rapacious thief. You have been destroying people's American dream. Where did you get $200 million? And here's poor Romney on the defensive, up against the wall, apologetic, trying to explain himself. Now you notice that no one makes this accusation against Trump. It's very interesting. Trump has more money than Romney. But nobody goes, Mr. Trump, where did you get $2 billion? You can't say this to Trump, because if you do, he sits you down and explains he has even more money than you thought. It totally doesn't work. I think that the reason that Trump has built a really strong base on the Republican side is because, ironically, he has human weaknesses that turn out at the same time to be political strengths. This is a weird thing to say, because it explains also why people are uncomfortable about Trump. And there are people who are, including my mother-in-law. They go, take away Trump's Twitter. I'm like, and give it to whom? What would they know what to do with it? But the critics of Trump are onto something, because from a human point of view, Trump has qualities that cannot be described in any other way than as weaknesses. Let's start. I want to mention two. One, the man clearly has a Himalayan ego. He even makes Obama look humble, which is not easy to do. In my movie, if you've seen Death of a Nation, it's on DVD. If you haven't seen it, you should. But it's out in streaming now and stuff. Anyway, on this movie, if you look at the poster, it morphs ahead of Lincoln and Trump. And it's true, some of my friends, and some of them are never Trumpers, and they go, Dinesh, they go, don't be ridiculous. How can you possibly, Lincoln and Trump? How would you put those two guys on the same image? It's insulting. But then I realized that actually this view of the comparison is also shared by Trump, but from the other direction. In other words, Trump comes in and he goes, well, I'm obviously numero uno, Now, what's this Lincoln guy doing in the same picture with me? Dinesh, I mean, this is insulting. Couldn't you at least have put his head a few inches below mine and with a top hat and all? So Trump is an egotist. But living at this strange time of American politics where you are being bashed every minute of every day on every platform. I mean, not just by the news, you're being bashed by the comedians, you're being bashed at the Emmys, you're being bashed at the Oscars, and when they open a Broadway show, and you're being bashed by people on your own side. So when this is going on, an ordinary person with a normal ego would have totally crumbled. But if you have this Himalayan ego, it's a kind of insulation that allows you to sort of ignore all the noise and just move relentlessly forward. So Trump's ego is a plus. Now, the other thing about Trump, and this would be a second weakness, is that if Trump gets attacked by somebody, and it doesn't matter if they are the Speaker of the House or a rival senator, it could be someone of no consequence at all, a completely meaningless, picayune person attacks him. He has an emotional need to attack them back. He can't not do it. He has to do it. And this makes him really very different than most Republicans, because in the world there are very strange people that it's sometimes best to avoid. Socrates once said that if you are in the presence of somebody who says something extremely stupid, the best response is silence. Don't say anything. Don't disagree, because you'll only provoke them. Keep quiet. But with Trump, it's not like that. Let's say that this admittedly crazy character, Omarosa, comes running into the room. Any other Republican would go under their desk. And they would put the curtain over their head, and they would just wait for her to leave the room. Not Trump. He wants to fight. But again, as I think about this quality, and it's not a good quality, right? I mean, we don't teach our children, we teach them the opposite. Self-control, restraint, pick your fights. But in this perverse political environment, where the ordinary Republican has become a little bit of an invertebrate, in this environment where you're being savaged by the other side, and in which there's open hostility from the media is not in the business of asking questions. They've almost become a wing of the Democratic Party. They're not enemies of the people, but they do seem to be enemies of any modicum of fairness or objectivity. I mean, when I think of this fellow, Acosta, this sort of overgrown fetus, the thing about this guy is that it's not that he's critical, it's that the same guy who was a complete butt licker for Obama now becomes a hostile figure with Trump and pretends like he's acting no differently. It's the hypocrisy that gets you. It's one thing if he said, look, I loved Obama. If Obama shot his grandmother, I'd explain why he had to do it. And I hate Trump. I'm going to do whatever I can to take that man down. That would at least be a refreshing, brutal honesty. But he pretends like, oh no, I'm just doing my job. I'm just asking the tough questions. This is what I think gets you. So I think with Trump, this kind of hitting back, which normally would be unacceptable, is, I think, needed under these conditions. Now, a lot of times when I think about American politics and I think about the two parties, and I think about the left and the right, and these terms are kind of confusing. In fact, the left and the right, these terms go back to the French Revolution. In the French Revolution, the people who supported the revolution sat on the left. And the people who opposed the revolution, who were the defenders of the monarchy and the aristocracy and the established church, they sat on the right. So left and right go back to that. So sometimes I think about, what does all of this really mean today? And I'd like to I'd like to round out my talk by focusing a little bit on the way that I, coming at it from the outside, see the ideological divide between the two sides. When I first came to America, I remember when I went to Washington, D.C., I was a young policy analyst in the Reagan White House at the very end, and I was invited to a reception in the 80s by Chuck Schumer, who was then a congressman. And I had he wasn't Chuck Schumer. But he had a reception for Indian Americans. And I was invited, and so were a bunch of other guys, Indian doctors and stuff. And I remember Chuck Schumer, the essence of his talk went something like this. He goes, "You Indians are not being good Americans." And we would be like, "What do you mean?" Because we were eager to be good Americans. And he said, "The problem is that when you come to America, you save money, you work hard, you try to get a good education, you try to advance in the American system, but as far as politics goes, you don't really do anything." And the Indians were like, "Yeah, that's because, in India, politics is a big mess, and so we try to stay away from it, and we just try to do our thing." And he goes, "I know, but no one's asking you to get into politics," but he goes, "Here I am, I'm a congressman." He goes, "You guys never come to my office, you never make any demands." And the Indians were like, "Well, what demands do you want us to make?" And he goes, I don't know. He goes, just come and make demands. That's what I'm here for. And I just remember that stuck in my mind, and I never made any sense of it, and I never thought about it. And then years later, closer to now, when I was researching the history of the Democratic Party, I read about a very interesting man. This is Martin Van Buren, who was the successor to Andrew Jackson, President of the United States in the mid-19th century. And the Democratic Party, most of you probably know, was founded as the party of the slave plantation. That's what it came into power to do, to defend the slave owners of the American South. But of course, Andrew Jackson, the founder of the Democratic Party, was a Tennessee slave owner. But Van Buren, who was a Northern Democrat from New York, no slaves. But Van Buren went south, and he saw the slave plantation, and he saw how the Democrats had established an almost monopoly power over the slave plantation. And Van Buren goes, "Let me figure out how to make the Democratic Party in the North just as strong as it is in the South. How do I do that? First of all, I need slaves. But I don't have any slaves, because slavery has been abolished in the North. But what I do have are immigrants, because the immigrants were coming to America in droves. Now, at this time, they were the Irish, the Italians, the Jews, but many of them were being coughed out of the most depressed parts of Europe, the Irish potato famine, a series of devastating famines and tragedies. So all these immigrants came to America. They were poor, they were scared. Many of them didn't speak the language. They were in a totally new country. In other words, they were vulnerable. They were vulnerable. And Van Buren goes, here is a formula for the Democratic Party's success in the North. Basically, what we have to do is cut a deal with the immigrants. But the deal is going to go like this. In slavery, you may say you have two parties, A and B, the master and the slave. And A, the master, steals the labor of B, the slave, and takes it for his own benefit. That's the meaning of slavery. Lincoln calls it, "You work, I eat." That's the essence of slavery right there. It's not even racial, it's just theft. With Van Buren, he came up with a theft scheme, but it was much more cunning. The theft scheme is more like this. Let's assume that you're the immigrants, and I'm Van Buren. I say to you, look, I'm not going to steal from you. In fact, you have nothing for me to steal from you. You don't have anything. But you do have something that actually costs you nothing. I want that. It's your vote. It's your vote. Give me that. Now, with that vote, I will get myself elected to power. And the good news is that there is something to steal from them. It's called the US Treasury. I will loot the Treasury and keep most of it for myself, but I will give some of the crumbs to you. So this became what was called the racket of the northern urban bosses, in which they would get the immigrant vote, and these Irishmen would get nothing out of it. I mean, they would get a job reference or a flask of whiskey or a turkey dinner at Thanksgiving, and that's it. But the reason it was worthwhile for them is that it was a modicum of security in exchange for something that cost them nothing. But the Democrats were really clear. I'm not going to compete for your vote and your vote and your vote separately. I don't want that. I want you to round up all the Irish guys and get them to vote together, ethnically, collectively for me. So in other words, the Democratic Party transferred from the black slave plantation to the northern ethnic plantation. And I mention all this historically because that's the formula even today. We've gone to what can be called the multicultural plantation, and essentially what's going on is that the Democrats would like to have your support, but it's a very mixed bag. It's a very mixed bag. Let me step back and put it a slightly different way, and I'd like to close on this note. As I look at American politics, I see two sides. On one side, let's call it the conservative side, you have the politics of the ladder. And the ladder is the ladder of opportunity. Now, the government has an important role, and the government's role is to hold the ladder, which means to protect our rights, to provide a basic safety net, to provide an external environment of security. But how far you climb on the ladder, that's up to you. That's based on your ability, your talent, your effort, and frankly, a little bit of luck. So that means some guys may get up to the third rung on the ladder and some other guys may get up to the seventh rung, but at the end of the day, the politics of the ladder is about keeping that ladder standing for people to make their lives better. But it is up to you. The other politics on the other side, the politics of the left, I'm going to call it the politics of the rope. And on the face of it, it's a more attractive politics than the ladder for this reason. Basically, you have a bunch of guys who are on top of a big building. And they look at the poor, black, brown people down there, and they say, listen, we have a rope. We're going to let the rope down. You hang on to it. We'll pull you up. So on the first glance, you go, wow, the rope is better, because in the ladder, I actually have to climb. In the rope, I just hang on. But then, if you're smart and you watch this for a little while, you realize, number one, this is a little bit of a dicey bargain, because I'm totally dependent on the fellow up there holding the rope. If he lets go, down I go. And second of all, I've been watching this rope for a while, and I notice a lot of people are being pulled, but they never get to the top. I never see them climb onto the building where the guys who are holding the rope are. They seem somehow to be hanging in perpetual limbo. In other words, you have communities today that have been helped for generations. You have black ghettos, Latino barrios, Native American reservations. Trillions of dollars have been put into these places, and yet they're not all that different than they were in 1972. They haven't actually fixed their problems. And there's a suspicious lack of urgency about fixing those problems. They appear to be just where people want them to be. And so then it crosses your mind that maybe the guys who are on top of the building don't have any plans to pull you all the way up. They have you right where they want you because you are now in a position of suspended dependency. In fact, you have no place to go. If you let go, you'll crash, and yet you can't pull yourself up. You're stuck. But while you're stuck, you remain 100% dependent on the guys who are holding the rope. In a sense, the rope has become, you hate to put it this way, a kind of a noose around your neck. And you are in a certain type of captivity that is regrettably partly of your own making. Why? Because you actually collaborated to get the setup in which you are now dangling in the air with no real prospect of advancement. So I think at the end of the day, as Americans, we have this choice. Do we actually want an America of the ladder, or do we want an America of the rope? Because the America of the rope is the path, I think, of dependency. And ultimately, that dependency destroys your dignity. Why? Because at the end of the day, the only real self-esteem can be in earned achievement. The only self-esteem is the pride of the kid who goes, I struggled with that math problem and I figured it out and I did it. And so I feel good about myself and it's going to motivate me to do the next one because I'm ready to tackle that challenge. It is that sense of earned achievement, I think, that drives our motivation and creativity as human beings. So at the end of the day, when I think about politics, I always try to go back to that original primordial moment when I first came to America, when I saw America fresh. Because if you think about it, the immigrant does have this double point of view. If you grow up in a different culture, and you have this to a degree as well, you're able to see America through this kind of double lens and compare America to other countries and identify things about this country that make it unique. America in 1800 was probably one of the handful of poorest countries in the world. Within 100 years, it was indisputably the richest country in the world and has never let that title go, nor does it seem likely to do so in the near future. How did that happen? Interestingly, we look at our history books, not a clue. They don't even address the problem. They don't give an answer. They don't even raise the question. A lot of what we call history is unfortunately progressive history. It's history written by progressives, and that's what you get in the history books, that's what you get in the History Channel, that's what you get on Wikipedia. Sometimes people who see my movies, they get a kind of indigestion. I mean, they accidentally wandered in and they're like, what? There's a bunch of Nazis and they're sitting around a table and they're writing these laws that turn Jews into non-human second-class citizens, and they're holding in their hands the democratic laws of the Jim Crow South, and they're crossing out the word black and writing in the word Jew. They're like, where's this crazy D'Souza getting all this madness from? And the answer is, there it is, indisputable in the historical record, but you won't find it in the textbooks because the progressives have left it out. And you won't find it in Wikipedia because after World War II, there was a very careful campaign to move fascism from the left-wing column into the right-wing column. I'm not saying that these are people who are outright lying, it's just that they're protecting their own side. They're covering up the crimes of their own party. They're spinning the story in such a way that inconvenient facts are downplayed, if not left out. And that's actually the importance of movies, because the movies tell an emotional narrative. I can give all the documentation in the book, and I do. But at the end of the day, the movie is it's a narrative and a visual experience. My goal is to offer a message that I hope will be encouraging to you and will motivate you to be a force for change right here in the Valley. This valley is actually quite diverse, and its values are quite conservative, but its politics is one-dimensional. I mean, you have a politics in which the congressman barely has to even campaign because he thinks he's got it in the bag. He has the same comfortable look as the fellow sitting on top of the building, looking at everybody down there and going, I don't have to work to convince them. They all depend on me. I'm their master, and they know it. And I think it's really important to mobilize a force and to perhaps sow a seed here this afternoon, a force that ultimately says, actually, that's the wrong message. Here in America, we don't have masters, and we're not anybody's servants. And we're going to actually organize and think and be creative and rise up and tell our friends and start getting a message out that at the end of the day, we are not the party of the rope. We want to be the party of the ladder. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.